Felix Auger-Aliassime.
Bianca Andreescu is a US Open champion. Shapovalov with the moment.
LEYLAH Fernandez. It is another performance to remember for the Canadians.
All right, everybody, welcome to The Slice and welcome to a new show coming at you from the Great White North, north of the net, Canada's tennis show. A new segment here on The Slice. I've got my wonderful co-hosts, Brendan and Crina here, who I will toss it to them to introduce themselves, their favorite Canadian tennis moment, and then we will get into a rundown of our topics for the day in this very special first episode of North of the Net on The Slice. Brendan.
Thank you, Steven. If you want to follow my Twitter handle, I'm at bmccarthy95. And favorite Canadian tennis moment certainly has to be, for me, Denis Shapovalov, Rogers Cup against Rafa Nadal 2017. Just put Shapo and Richmond Hill on the map, and one of the greatest comeback underdog stories in Canadian tennis history, frankly.
Absolutely.
They like to forget about that, you know, like they just kind of push him to Toronto now. Like every time any of these like athletes go out, and it's like it's no longer Richmond Hill, it's like Toronto now.
Yeah,
even
true.
You're from these
True.
like smaller places.
And where are you from, Brendan? Or did you say it?
Well, I usually say Toronto, Ontario when I'm away on trips, but for anyone who lives in the burbs, I'll say Ajax, Ontario. There's not much going on here except for the keg and Il Fornello, so I'll say Toronto, but born and raised in Ajax.
Ajax represent. Crina.
Yeah, so you guys can follow me on Twitter at CrinaMM. My favorite moment definitely has to be Bianca Andreescu winning the US Open back in, 2019. That's a long time ago now. That's pretty much like the best summer of my life with the Raptors winning the championship as well. And then there's also, I'm Romanian Canadian. So Bianca is also in the same boat as me. So I really took a liking to her also because of that. And that's why I'm like a number one Simona Halep fan. But I also say I'm from Toronto, but I'm from North York, which is, not that far out of the downtown center, but far enough.
So we got two Easterners here, which is great, Toronto area folks. And if you guys didn't know, I'm from Vancouver Island, or I'm from Kamloops, but I live now on Vancouver Island on the West Coast. So we've got, I think, all of Canada kind of covered. Maybe not the East Coast, but people tend to forget about them anyway. Sorry. But maybe, Brendan, do you want to just give the quick rundown of the sets that we're going to cover today? And then Crina can maybe preview the tiebreak at the end of the show.
Yes, so Shapovalov's good buddy, Felix Auger-Aliassime, won his first title at Rotterdam. So we're going to kick things off with recapping that. Then we're going to move into LEYLAH Fernandez, who's not even 20 yet. She's still a teen, and she already has a WTA title to her name. So that'll be set 2. And then set 3, Shapovalov, known for a bit of a explosive demeanor behavior. He's had a little bit of beef with now injured Rafa Nadal, 21-time Grand Slam champion. So we'll kick that off at the end. And then for a little tiebreak, we'll recap Indian Wells and also preview Miami Open.
I love how you said a now injured Rafa just to make the
just to toss that in because
even more dramatic.
Like, how could he?
I know. He was clearly struggling. And I know Taylor Fritz was as well, but I mean, a bunch of medical timeouts for Rafa. Like clearly something was pending, and the news broke today with a fractured rib, correct?
Yep, fractured rib for Rafa Nadal. The super weird thing is, I don't know how you fracture your rib playing tennis. That's it's not a contact sport. And the one thing that was weird, though, I think we talked about this offline, is he was getting, it seemed like his rib maybe adjusted by a chiropractor on the court. I was like, is that maybe where he actually cracked it? I don't know. That's the only thing I could have seen. Nobody smashed him with a ball or anything like that I saw.
Maybe a heckler in commercial break. We don't know. The hecklers have been out in full force of late. So,
yep, it was in Indian Wells. It was pretty crazy. Nick Kyrgios had a few goes at the crowd for sure. But alas, this is a Canadian show about Canadians by Canadians. The three of us are passionate Canadian tennis fans, and that's why we created this show, because it's the best time ever for Canadian tennis. I think that's pretty obvious, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So, Crina, why don't you kick us off the top with set number 1, kind of set the stage.
Yeah, for sure. I was super excited about Felix finally winning his first ATP title. It feels like it was a long time coming, but also in such a short amount of time. And I think what made this even more impressive was all the like really like top seeds that he kind of knocked out on his way there, like including Rublev. And I've been a huge fan of Felix's potential for a really long time now. Like I always saw him as kind of the best out of between him and Shapo. I don't know if that's a little bit of a hot take, but I always thought that he would have, like, I think they both have potential, but I think that Felix would be the one to kind of break through that. And we saw that with him winning his first title. I just think like his style of play is kind of different than everybody else in a way, if that makes sense. Like he's not afraid to go to the net, but he's also that really, really strong baseline player that I just love watching. And his flick of the wrist with his forehands is just incredible.
Well, I think too with Felix, I mean, he's got such a quiet demeanor, right? Like you don't hear much of his, if any, like any problems he has with the ump. He's never really complaining. Whereas his good buddy in Shapo, as I alluded to before, like he's a bit of a hothead, which could almost kind of affect his game. So with Felix, he had to go through some tough stretch of opponents to finally claim the ultimate prize and achieving a title on tour. And he did that. And, I talked about moments and feats that Canadian players had that put them on the map. This was something that Felix was, trying to achieve for a while. And for him, it's really a weight lifted. He's like, okay, now I'm not just a guy who can, make it to the semis, like at the US Open, or like have a couple of finals appearances. I can actually do this and actually win a title on tour. So really a fantastic achievement. And I agree with you. I've been, singing Felix's praises. I think he has the chance to not only just be the top male Canadian tennis player right now. I think he's ranked 9th. He has a really, really good chance of firming up that spot. I don't think anyone's catching him. And forget too, he's like 6'4". So not only is he a good baseball player, but his reach and length is just something that drives opponents crazy. And head to head between him and Shapovalov, I think it's 3-3. But one of those matches, remember, was at the US Open in 2018 when he had to retire due to heart issues. So, yeah. I mean, you can't really say that was all Shapo's beating on him. I mean, he did also, came down to a retirement of the game. So 3-3 right now, but I think Felix is going to end up being the better of the two.
Wow, interesting, guys. That's I think a lot of people kind of, the original hype train was on Shapo, but then right away, like people were talking about Felix when he was 14, 15. Right. Yeah, but you guys know 8-0 or 0-8 in finals up to this point. So Felix was getting a lot of flack from people, fans, especially on the slice here. People are just roasting him in the comments all the time, being like, "No finals, Felix," or like doesn't show up in the finals.
That's so mean.
Yeah, it's mean, but you gotta, when you're a top professional, people are gonna, and people notice a trend. It's the case. So it was funny because I was actually in the press rooms every day during the Rotterdam title run for him. And, I didn't want to be the journalist to ask about, hey, like as he got closer to the final, like, hey, it looks like you're going to have another final here. Like, is this going to be the one? But like literally all these other journalists kept asking like, hey, you haven't won a title yet. And then he would always be like, yeah, I know. So I think it was huge for him to get the monkey off his back and get that title. And Rotterdam is not a small title. It's an ATP 500. It's not just some little 250 somewhere. Not that those are little, but you know what I mean? He beat Rublev on the way there. He beat Cam Norrie. Then he beat Stefanos Tsitsipas in the final, which is a huge victory over, I think Stefanos was number 3 in the world at that time. So huge title for Felix. No longer has to think about that. And I like how he backed himself every time he was asked about it. He said, look, I won the ATP Cup for Canada earlier this year. Shout out ATP Cup for Canada. And so it's not like I can't perform in these times. And, 8 finals is not... One quote, actually, and I'll let you guys have your thoughts on this. He said, 8 finals is not going to look like a lot at the end of my career. So he said, I'm 0 for 8, but, if I make 90 finals, that's not going to seem like a very big streak. And I was like, back yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, like, even as a Simona Halep fan, she kind of went through the same thing where she was making all these finals, these really, really big finals, and she was losing in the Grand Slam finals too. And then she finally broke through when she won the French Open in 2018. So I kind of see it like the same with Felix, where now that he has this title under his belt, I feel like there could be like a release of pressure off of his shoulders now, which could allow him to play even better tennis than he is right now. And I know, like, we're going to talk about this later, like in Indian Wells obviously didn't go as well as we would have hoped, but with the way they started out the calendar year, I think that's more than okay.
Absolutely. Brendan, why don't you take us into set 2 here?
Yes. So Felix and LEYLAH were also the 2 Canadians who surpassed the quarterfinals plus a few short months ago at the U.S. Open. So they were certainly rooting for each other. LEYLAH continues to dominate, and she's not even 20 years old yet, winning MONTERREY. And, you know, I was looking at the stretch of opponents she had to take on in order to ultimately win the title. And maybe not some well-known names, but that shouldn't really, you know, take away from the fact that, you know, she can compete with the best of them. Like I was mentioning the U.S. Open, her U.S. Open stretch before, and the opponent she had to take on. I mean, Svitolina, Sabalenka, Kerber, and Osaka. 3 of 4 of those opponents are in the top 5, and all 4 of them are top 15 at the time. Obviously, the WTA rankings have shifted a bit with Iga Swiatek's win. She's now, I think she catapulted to number 2 in the world. Yeah. So, I mean, she can play with the best, and I mean, just her poise, man. Like she's like just ferocious in the backcourt, like a petite player, but I mean, like just her stroke. Especially her forehand. I mean, this is the first of many, and she's Bianca's going to be having to look in her rearview mirror a little bit more because there's another ferocious competitor right behind her.
Well, Crina, I'll let you jump in here, but I was going to say it's actually, well, if you remember, Brendan, she won the Monterrey title last year, so she actually defended her title this year, and I don't know. A lot of people. We'll get to Bianca in the tiebreaker here, but I think a lot of people would say that LEYLAH's already not surpassed her in titles, and like, you know, but right now she's ahead of her in the rankings, and she's the more informed player. So yeah, that's a good debate actually. Who's the lead Canadian female tennis player at the moment? What do you think, Crina?
That's why I'm a Bianca truther. So I want her to come back so that everybody can remember how good of a player Bianca is. I think. I see it happening as a possibility. To me, it's still very, very close. I think with all the time that Bianca has missed, whether that's been like through injuries or for other reasons, I think we haven't had like a big enough sample size, even though she did win a Grand Slam. So I just want her to come back so we can all remember what she looks like, what her game looks like. But even with LEYLAH, I think, you know, the run at the U.S. Open was really good. Although I think, and the same argument kind of goes for Emma Raducanu now, a lot of expectations were placed on these two, especially being so young and like doing this for the first time. And so even though, like you mentioned, there weren't a lot of like really known big names at Monterrey, she beat Camila Osorio in the final. Camila is a really, really sharp young player. Like she's not, you know,
also a lot of hype. Yeah.
Nobody. Exactly. Right. And so I think getting what she needs now is more experience playing these kind of matches and just getting more of these matches under her belt so that like eventually she is going to overcome whatever she needs to do at the Grand Slam, and just be able to achieve a higher level of tennis, because I think right now experience is what she needs.
Yep. Experience is what she needs, and expectations are just what you get when you make the final of a slam. So I don't feel bad for Emma Raducanu or LEYLAH Fernandez, you know, because they bring it on, and LEYLAH, did have a ton of expectations on herself going into the Australian Open with all the brand announcements, etc. Didn't have a great result there, but definitely followed it up in Monterrey. So that was awesome to see.
Now, neither of the two we have mentioned really have any volatile personalities. They're pretty subdued. But should we get to the guy that certainly does have a bit of a well-documented volatile personality? He's a pretty explosive player.
He's a firecracker.
It's kind of interesting to see. I mean, we've seen it before in the world of sport where, you know, rookie players get after Steph Curry or you know, NHL players are getting at refs for not, you know, calling plays on Crosby or elite players. And I understand. I mean, like Shapovalov is a, you know, fantastic player and he can compete with the best of them. But isn't there a line where it's like, there has to be a level of respect. For those who don't know what I'm referring to, he basically had a bit of a meltdown with the chair ump, calling them corrupt because Nadal takes too long between serves. And at some point, it's kind of like, you kind of, in my opinion, you just have to kind of swallow it. I mean, look, like you got to look at the guy who you're playing, right? Are you playing a lucky loser? Are you playing an unranked player? You're playing, the guy who has the most Grand Slam titles to his name for all males. So, I mean, I think it's a little bit much. And then obviously he had to kind of double down in the second press conference saying, I don't think corrupt is the right word. And you don't want to say that to a chair ump. I think obviously he's trying to say there's some favoritism. Yeah. And that's kind of inevitable though. I mean, it's Rafa Nadal. It could be, at some point you kind of just have to swallow it. And there's going to be a time and place in a few years where the ump's going to be like, sorry, like to some, newbie from, Argentina who's you're playing Denis Shapovalov, so you kind of just have to eat it. Sorry. Yeah. So I think in short, Shapo kind of, it was obviously blown up, but I think Shapo kind of just needs to harness a little bit of that and just kind of swallow it.
I find it a little bit, I find it a little bit odd too, because I think Rafa actually doesn't have a good history with that chair umpire that was with that match. Right. Like, I don't know. I remember seeing something. So that was kind of odd to me. It was like, if the chair umpire hasn't really had a good history with Rafa, is he really showing favoritism? What is actually happening here? Because Rafa wasn't actually breaking any rules per se. Like, nothing really stood out to me in that match. It was me to more Shapo was getting super frustrated with the way the match was going. And, we've been talking about his demeanor. And one of the reasons why I had originally separated Felix from Denis Shapovalov is because he hasn't really reached that level of maturity yet, if that kind of makes sense. Like that firecracker, Stephen, like you described him, personality, I feel sometimes blocks him from just taking a deep breath and like playing his game, because his game is really good. It's not like he's not a weak player. He has so much star potential. Absolutely. And so when he gets into those moments, I feel like it kind of trips him up a little bit. And all of a sudden he's focusing on the calls from the umpire, or like, this is going wrong. It's because this player is doing this, instead of, focusing on his O game and realizing that he can take control in that match if he wanted to.
Yeah. And if you, both of you guys are spot on. Like, if you remember in that match, he actually started complaining about Rafa's time between sets, like in the second game of the match, I think. Like, the match hadn't even really started. He wasn't even behind. Like, he was, to me, Rafa, or Shapo, anyone who's like, explosive, like spazzy on the court, like Shapo, like me, like Kyrgios, like a lot of like players, like most players, like it's all about just trying to keep it under, like keep it together. And I thought, it's like, if I was in Shapo's head there, I'd be like, how is this helping you in this match? How is complaining to the ref about someone else, about something that doesn't even really affect you, help you in the match? But at the same time, I understand what is frustrating about him, because the reason he said something is because he was sitting there waiting to serve, and Rafa wasn't even up out of the bench yet, and he had to walk over to the thing. So Shapo's going to stand up for himself, and I respect him for doing that, saying like, look, I'm ready to serve. The rules are like, you have to play to the server's speed. And then I think the umpire and him got into it, because the umpire is like, look, Rafa's going to be slow all night. I'm going to like wait a little bit to like get on him. And it's not like umpires haven't given Rafa, like, I don't agree that Rafa gets preferential treatment, basically. And I would say, but in the moment, I understand why Shapo thought that. But the shot clock has basically been implemented because of Rafa. He's gotten,
and because of Novak. Let's not forget Novak.
Yeah, 20 bounce like Novak.
A minute to
True. So basically, because two of those guys, and they're the two biggest, two of the biggest stars in the game, and then Rafa consistently gets time warning violations. And sometimes in like at really big points in a match, like in the third or fourth or fifth set in slams. So yeah, I think Shapo just that was just a mentally weak moment where he just let that frustration come out, and that's like, I know he almost came back and won the match, but right away, what's the worst thing that you could do against a player who's like better than you is like show your cards and like show that you're frustrated, because Rafa goes, oh, this is perfect, I got you right where I want you.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know. I just feel like Shapo could learn so much from Rafa. And like it makes me sad a little bit, this beef, because I don't know, I feel like they would have such a real, like they have a really good rivalry already. I mean, we've seen that Shapo can beat Nadal. We've seen that he can go the distance at a Grand Slam against him. So I don't know. The whole thing was just kind of like, I don't know, disappointing, I guess is the word. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, a guy who didn't falter against Rafa Nadal, Taylor Fritz. We got to give a bit of love to our American neighbor south of the border, and also a guy, as you alluded to before, Christina, that and when you were talking about Felix, how he gets to so many finals, but doesn't obviously come up with the ultimate prize. I believe Taylor Fritz had 7 or 8 finals appearances before actually beating Nadal, and then before actually winning a title on tour. And then what better way to do it against Rafael Nadal? So, and that's a guy who kind of just kept his composure. Watching that full set or full match. I mean, there's always kind of a time in the match where you think the underdog's like, okay, when is he going to slip? But he didn't. So that was a remarkable way to end the Indian Wells.
Absolutely, that was a crazy tournament. Let's get your kind of thoughts on the Canadian player performances at Indian Wells. Obviously, I think it was pretty disappointing in general. We did. I think LEYLAH had she had a good win over Shelby Rogers, who we did a live stream watch party with. But Felix and Shapo went out early, both of them. But you're right, Brendan. Taylor Fritz was absolutely impressive. I still can't really believe he pulled it out, playing the way that he did. It was just like, it wasn't like redlining, but it was like about as close as you can get. What were your thoughts on that, on the performances of the Canadians at Indian Wells, Crina and Fritz?
Yeah, obviously. Well, okay, I'll start with Fritz because I was very happy to see that. I was getting to a point last year where I was like, is Taylor Fritz going to be like a Milos Raonic, who has like so much potential? We know he's really good, but he's never going to get there consistently. And luckily,
shots fired at Milos Raonic.
All respect. Okay, look, I love Milos. Okay, I don't
painful
in any. Okay, anyway, moving on. But I last year that was kind of where I was at, and then to start the year off, he was playing some really inspiring tennis, like at the Australian Open, I think. And even though like he lost a really tough match, I think it was against Monfils, I can't remember right now, but he was playing tennis that made me think that maybe he could possibly do something this year and get over that hump that I was talking about earlier. And so to see him win and to see him win against Rafa was unbelievable. I feel like these are the most satisfying wins in tennis, when somebody new kind of breaks out and they break out against one of these top players, like whether that was like Bianca beating Serena, or, right now like Taylor Fritz beating Rafa, or like Medvedev beating any of these top players. I really like those kind of wins because it kind of shows, hey, the next generation is coming for those titles and for that kind of level of tennis. As for the Canadian side, it was kind of disappointing. Like Shapo lost to Opelka, I think, very early on. Felix
right before the Nadal possible rematch. That would have been. Let's just say it. That would have been.
You didn't want to face
saucy.
I aspire to reach that level of petty.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think it's okay. Like with the way that the year started for both of them, I think they were probably going to have like a month or a tournament where it was kind of going to dip down a little bit because you can't be on that high all the time. So there's plenty of time for them to bounce back at Miami. And I think it's a good place for them to do so.
Yeah, I actually forgot who Felix lost to right now.
It was Van de Zandschulp, I think.
Yes, Botic, Van de Zandschulp. So not a good result for Felix, but really that's the only early loss of his whole season so far. He's had nothing but great results. Already a final, a title, semifinals at the Australian Open, ATP Cup final. So he deserved a bit of a week off there. Unfortunately, it happened at Indian Wells, which is a big points tournament. But let's look ahead quickly at their draws, the three of them, because Bianca's not playing. So I'll let maybe Crina have her thoughts on your big Bianca stan. Is that what the kids are saying these days? Stan? You stan them?
Okay, don't call me a stan. I'm not a stan.
What does that even mean? I don't actually. What does that mean?
Okay, the word stan is kind of problematic in its own sense because the original meaning of that word was like stalker fan. And so they blended it together for Stan.
Okay.
But now they just use it to describe people who are like really, really obsessed with a celebrity or a player.
That
or
is new slang to my ears.
I don't know. That's the next generation beneath me, I think.
It's usually just like those accounts that have like players in their profile picture and not their actual faces, and that's usually like the Stan account.
So you're not a Stan, but you are a big fan of Bianca. So yeah, so let's that's funny. It's like I didn't know what that meant, but now I know. You learn something new every day. So we got Shapovalov in the top half of the draw. He's in Daniil Medvedev's quarter. Could play Dan Evans in the third round. Could play Lloyd Harris in his first match, he lost to Lloyd Harris at the U.S. Open. And then he could play Bautista Agut in the fourth round. So it's a tough quarter, I would say, for Shapovalov. And then Felix is in the second quarter, which is Tsitsipas's quarter. If you're looking at that, I would look at Tsitsipas and say Felix, and I would say it'd be disappointing if Felix didn't make the quarters, because he's going to be the serious favorite in anyone he plays, really. I mean, except for he could play Sebastian Korda, he can kind of be a giant killer. He could play him in the third round, but Sebastian would have to win 2 matches to get there. He could play Taylor Fritz in the fourth round, but I'm still taking Felix over Taylor Fritz on a faster hard court like Miami, because Felix's 1-2 punch off the serve is as good as basically anyone's in the world right now. What do you guys think about their chances on a quicker Miami court in the top half of the draw there?
I think at this rate, all 3 will be quarterfinals or better at the rate they're going right now.
Wow. Book it.
Short and sweet.
Book it right now.
Yeah, book it. We'll write that down. We'll see if that comes true. We'd love it to come true. That would be great. I haven't even kind of talked quickly about where LEYLAH's at, but let's see who she's going to play. Did you have any thoughts on LEYLAH's quarter there? Because I know she could play Kerber. We talked about it at the top, Brendan. She could play Kerber in the third round. She could play Osaka maybe in the third round. Yeah. And then she's in Contivate's quarter or 8.
That's a tough one. I wouldn't put as much on LEYLAH in that one as you are, Brendan.
I'm sticking to my guns.
Respect. Brendan's
okay, if I lose, I'll mail you guys a sleeve of tennis balls.
Well, if you lose, you go down supporting the Canadian tennis players. So that's never a bad thing.
Go down.
Yeah. I think I have more confidence in the guys here than I do in LEYLAH, and that's not a slight on LEYLAH at all. Sure, like I was talking about before, like she needs the experience, so I think whatever comes out of this is going to be good for her. Mm-hmm. Also, a side note, I really love the Miami Open court. It may be my favorite court out of all the tournaments in the year. It's such a nice shade of blue. Like, it's so pretty, and I love watching players play on it. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but Venus Williams was playing on it, and she had done her hair with like light blue tips at the end.
Oh yeah.
It was really nice. I really like this tournament. But yeah, I think this is going to be the one where Dennis and Felix kind of maybe snap back at their performance in Indian Wells. At least now they've had a bit of rest, because it's been kind of like heavy hitting to start the year. So maybe that's what they needed, honestly.
Yep. Miami Open is sick. And I don't know if I've ever even told you this, guys. I was physically there in 2019 with a press credential, hanging out on the grounds. And I can confirm that those courts, I think, are pretty, one of the coolest courts on the tour. And yeah, it's a very cool event. And 2019, Felix and Shapovalov made the semifinals at the Miami Open, if you guys remember. So they do have history, both of them, of doing well on these courts at the new stadium. And yeah, Brendan, what do you think? You've picked all 3 to make the quarter. So do you see any of them going further than that?
I'll stick with Felix. I mean, I was riding high on the guy at the beginning of our filming here. So I think if up to 3, I think he'll outlast the bunch.
Yeah, I'd say it's a good pick, because on a fast court, I'd take him over Stefanos Tsitsipas right now, and maybe they'll get a rematch in the quarters. But anyways, guys, that is the North of the Net first episode with the host Brendan and Crina, color commentator myself, Steven, on the Slice. If you guys are watching this, leave your comments down below, leave a couple questions, and we will answer them on our next show. We'll pick kind of from the stands questions and use them in the tiebreak section maybe. But thank you guys for watching. Thanks for being here, Brendan and Crina. Great work. And I'm looking forward to the very next episode to break down Miami results and talk about the clay swing and maybe talk more about Bianca because we just ran out of time today.
Yeah, super fun.
Okay. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you later.